Good morning.
Good morning.
I would really like to thank Anthony and J.E.Bergasse for inviting me here today. This is not a normal conversation because we're dealing with life and death here. And we're also dealing with misinformation, anti-science, and a whole raft of issues that we need to get some perspective on. I have had the unfortunate experience of seeing St. Lucians get sick and seeing them die. I remember I lost a good friend of mine very early in this pandemic. That was Mr. Lucia. Lucia came in, walked down to the lab, wasn't feeling so well, but just some muscle pains. Had a test, found out he had COVID. 5 days later, Wilkie was dead. Died in the Victoria Hospital, the respiratory hospital, fighting for breath, without anybody around him. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is not a fake fact. That is a fact. And all of you all know that. And he's not the only one. And I know that as I speak, each of you probably know people that have died, St. Lucians. Not even talking here about Indians and Americans and English people. Well, we've seen that too. You know? What are we seeing now? We're seeing unvaccinated people dying. Vaccinated people are largely protected, but the unvaccinated are carrying the brunt of the new waves of this coronavirus, this COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus. Make no mistake, St. Lucia is not exempt from another wave of COVID-19. The Delta variant is all around us. I have every reason to believe it's already in our communities. We already have active community transmission with well over 100 active cases right now in St. Lucia. So make no mistake, we're going to have more disease, more hospitalization, and more death. So what is St. Lucia's situation with vaccination? I think we have some 20-odd thousand people that have had full vaccination with the 2 doses. And we've probably had about 30-something thousand that have had the first dose. And the rate of uptake of vaccines now is essentially negligible. We're probably in the bottom of the Caribbean in terms of our vaccination rates. And you can say that is sad, but the real sadness of that is when the next waves come, you who are not vaccinated are going to be at risk. Just look at the United States, look at India, look at the other countries and understand. As I say, when your neighbor's bed is on fire, take water and wet your own. Okay? You have a minimal window. I'll explain to you why. The vaccine takes some time before it offers you protection. You take the shot today, you're not protected today. You're not protected tomorrow. It's going to take a couple of weeks before you begin to get any protection. And as you know, you have to wait another 8 or so weeks for the second dose for you to really, and then 2 weeks after that, for you to really get up to protection levels. So by the time the coronavirus comes on you, too late shall be the cry. And the unfortunate thing with the Delta variant and the variants that are yet to come, there's the Epsilon and the Lambda, that Epsilon has now been called a variant of concern, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Lambda is on its way onto that list. These variants are more infectious, and therefore also you will more hospitalization and more death. And indeed, even young people now, we used to say, and you know, the rhetoric of a few months back that, oh, young people are protected, young people don't get sick. That's not true. They do get sick, and they do die. We've had them here, by the way. We've had 21-year-olds that have died of corona. Right? So make no mistake, because you think you're young, you think that you're safe. Now, that's not how it works. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. But to begin with, I want to give you some scientific basis for our conversation. So I just have a couple of slides, which are really pictures to let you understand the science of immunology, the science of virology, so we can go forward. Before I put that slide on, I want you to understand something else. When human beings assess risk in their lives, it's not like how a computer assesses risk. AI and algorithms are very precise. They look at facts and they assess risk based on probability, which is statistically factual. Human beings, unfortunately, have many overlays and underlays to how we assess risk and make our decisions. So it becomes, we add that emotional piece. So if you were to look at risk of vaccine versus risk of COVID-19, there is no comparison. Vaccines are thousands upon thousands of times safer than the COVID-19 itself. But you're going to hear, boy, the vaccine does cause problems. So you ain't touching that. So you'll touch COVID and you'll not touch the vaccine. That's a stupid decision. Sorry to tell you that. Stupid decision. In life, you always must make decisions that take you to a safer place. But you will find that you will be caught up with the emotions of things. So I'm going to try to give you some of the science in the hope that with that understanding, you can make a better risk assessment and a better judgment for you personally and those around you. The last thing I want to say before I go to the slides is, as I see all of you here, I will be unashamedly, unabashedly tell you, I want to recruit you as change agents. So I don't want you to get information and go away and make a decision for yourself, but I want you to go out there and advocate, because I want you to be a good citizen. I want you to be a patriot. I want you to go out there and encourage everybody in your family and in your community to get vaccinated, not tomorrow, today. Start now, because we are already late. Okay? Let's go to the first slide. This slide is merely to show you how your cells behave when they're producing proteins. Proteins are the substances of life. They are what make everything happen. On the far left is DNA. That's in our genetic material. Then we have, how does DNA work? DNA opens up and produces what we call RNA, which is like a messenger. That comes out into the cell and causes the cell to produce proteins. It's very specific. So the body makes no mistakes when it comes to this. Very precise. The DNA code is precisely translated into an RNA code, which is precisely translated into a protein. We can get changes at the DNA level, and that's how we call mutants, or even at the RNA level, which are mutants, which is a change, but they will faithfully reproduce the change. So this is how it happens. And when you use vaccines, we have RNA vaccines, DNA vaccines, and protein vaccines. And we're going to talk about how they work. But you can appreciate even now that if I give you a DNA vaccine, it will cause your body to go through this process to produce proteins that you will then develop an immune response to. If I give you an RNA vaccine, it will do the same thing. If I give you a protein vaccine, it will do the same thing. So let's go to the next slide. This is the enemy. Now, unfortunately, human beings define their enemies in strange ways. We define our enemies by class, creed, geography, politics, geopolitics. However, make no mistake, this is the only enemy we have in this particular fight, SARS-CoV-2. So you better understand this enemy so you can deal with it. It's not a sensible, intelligent being. It's rather stupid. But unfortunately, some of us are more stupid than it. But this is what it looks like. It's called corona because it looks like a sun. And those blue spikes coming off look like rays. That's what they call the spike protein. That is the protein that binds to a particular receptor in our cells unlocks our cells and allows this virus to get inside our cells, pump its genetic material, which is RNA, pump that into our cells, which then take over our cells and start to reproduce the virus. Okay? This is how it works. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is what it looks like. So here's the virus. It binds to a receptor into the host cell and starts to reproduce itself. However, our bodies are intelligent at the molecular level and at the cellular level also. So our bodies will automatically begin to develop an immune response. How do we do that? We take one of our immune cells, it takes up the foreign object, in this case, a virus. It presents it to another cell in our immune system, which is what we're calling it a helper cell. It actually then directs the immune response specifically to that invading entity. What happens? We produce what we call antibodies, and we produce activated T cells. So let me give you that sounds complicated, but let me explain it to you in the simple terms of the police, because the immune system is our policing system. Antibodies are like police handcuffing you. So that's the antibody is a handcuff. It recognizes a foreign entity, handcuffs it. The T cells, which are your cellular ones, are the ones that draw the guns and shoot and kill. They recognize this handcuffed entity, bam, and they kill it. That is what the immune system does. The other thing the immune system does, it creates what we call memory. Memory allows us to understand if we were ever exposed to this foreign agent again invading us. Our memory says we don't have to go through this whole long process of identifying the agent and developing a response. We can immediately mount a specific targeted response because we remember that agent. It's like the wanted poster. I see the killer, I recognize him, I'll take him out. That is what memory does. Now, when we talk about a vaccine mimics this process. I hear people talking about vaccines as if they're some sort of pharmaceutical that is some sort of foreign pharmaceutical, right? And it's big pharma science and that kind of stuff. But I want to take you to the basic science of a vaccine, which is mimicking an infection to prepare your body to deal with a real infection. So what the vaccines do is produce that spike protein, which is a crucial protein on this virus. So we in various ways, we either put the protein in you, the spike protein, we give you the DNA, or we give you the RNA, or we give you inactivated whole virus. Whatever we do, we give you this so you can mount a specific response to this safe substance that we're putting into you. You develop memory, and when you get exposed to the real agent, you can mount your specific response and eliminate it. That is how vaccines work. Okay? So they're like the training for the real deal. Why? And some people ask, why do we give more than one dose? Well, I tell people it's like memory is like beating books. You remember when you had to study to learn something, you read it once, you kind of know it. You read it twice, you know it a lot better. That is what the two shots do. The first shot gives you a decent understanding of the foreign agent. The second shot boosts that memory so that it is sustainable and it is more robust. In addition, many people tell me, well, I'm taking the vaccine, but I'm still getting sick. I'm still getting the virus. Well, think about this for a minute. If you see you've got memory of this specific protein that is on this foreign agent, and you get exposed to this foreign agent, what's going to happen in your body? Your body is going to take this foreign agent, recognize it, take it to memory, and memory is going to say, oh, I see it, I understand it, and it will mount the response. It will take some time, because the cells have to replicate and produce the proteins, and the cells have to get activated. So are you surprised that it might take some hours, maybe even a day or two, for your immune system, your trained immune system now, to develop a specific response? No, it's not surprising. It's just natural. But when you do mount that specific response, it'll be robust, targeted, and you will eliminate. So that is why people who are vaccinated have a range of responses when they get exposed to this virus. Some have what we call sterile immunity. Their immune systems are so strong and so robust and so rapid in their response that as soon as they see that agent, bam, within hours they kill it. These people never get infected. Then there's some of us, our immune systems are not quite as rapid. So the virus has a time to get a foothold, and then the army comes in, the police come in and take it out. So you have a mild infection, you may even have a moderate infection. So are you surprised now if I was to tell you that if you compare vaccinated to unvaccinated people, a vaccinated person will have very high protection against death, very high protection against hospitalization, and high protection against infection, and reasonable protection against transmitting the disease. And I'll give you those percentages just now. In an unvaccinated person, what will happen when they get exposed to this virus? The virus will come in, the body will know that it is foreign, but will not know how to deal with it. So it's going to have to go through this process. This process that I mentioned, from going from an unexposed person to a person having an immune reaction, that takes 1 to 2 weeks. Your body takes 1 to 2 weeks to be able to mount that specific response. In that 1 to 2 weeks, that virus wreaks havoc in your body. That is why the unvaccinated have a much worse course than the vaccinated. Much worse course in terms of much higher death, 5,000 times the rate, right? Much higher hospitalization rates, much higher disease complications, 16 to 20,000 times. The difference between the unvaccinated and the vaccinated. Why would you not do? Why would you not take yourself into a safer place? Why would you not prepare your immune system to deal with this infection? Next slide. And this is just showing you the kind of response you get when we're catching COVID. It starts when you get exposed to a virus. It takes a while for that virus to establish itself and start, and even before your body starts to mount any reaction. So that's really what this slide is showing. It also shows you the difference between PCR and antigen. And there are 2 different tests for picking up this virus. In fact, there are 3 tests. There's the antigen test, there's the PCR test, and there's the antibody test. All of them are good. All of them give us different information. The antigen test correlates with high viral load and infectivity. The PCR test correlates with having viral nucleic material in our bodies, so it lasts much longer. It can last up to 6 weeks, 3 months in our bodies. So we can be over the infection and still have the nucleic acid in our bodies. The antibody tells us that our body have reacted, have started the reaction, have mounted an immune response. You see 2 of them there, IgM and IgG. IgM is early antibody, IgG is long-lasting antibody. Next slide. Okay, herd immunity. You hear a lot about it. And without boring you with all of this, let me just take you to the bottom line figure. 60 to 72% of us need to have immunity for this virus to stop spreading in our population. With the Delta variant, by the way, which is twice as infectious as the Alpha variant, this goes up. Because if you were to look at what we call the R, when you're calculating the level of population immunity, the R rate, which is how infectious the virus is very important. So in fact, as the more infectious variants are coming on, the herd immunity level has to rise. In other words, 72% might work for the Alpha variant, but it's going to have to be 80% for the Delta variant. You with me? The point being, we cannot sit back and say, let the other 60% go, I'm going to wait. All of us must step up now. Because if we don't, and the virus continues to circulate in our population, we will produce more variants, more infectivity, more dangerous variants. That is why herd immunity, that's one reason why herd immunity is important. And why we must step up now to become vaccinated and get our solution population up to at least 80% protected. There are actually 2 ways of becoming protected. One is natural immunity, and the other one is vaccine or acquired immunity. Natural immunity says, get COVID infection and get your antibodies, get your immune system sorted out. The problem with natural infection is it will cause a lot of disease, a lot of hospitalization, a lot of death. The death rate If you look at St. Lucia, I think it's 87 people dead out of 5,400 or so cases. It's about a 1.5% death rate. If you look at the overall population, it's closer to about maybe a 0.6 or so percent death rate. But that is way too high. 0.6% might sound like nothing much, but you do the math. 0.6% of 180,000 people. How many people are we prepared to die? How many people are we prepared to lose? And who are we prepared to lose? You see, it's all well and good to say, I did not know that person and that person died. It's a much different story when it's your mommy, or your daddy, or your spouse, or your child. Much different. So, and the problem with this thing, you don't know who's going to go. That's another nasty thing about this particular virus. So the other reason for getting to what we call herd or population immunity is that we can move away from restrictive protocols, lockdowns, masking, etc., etc. We can get back to shall we say, a more social way of living. Because some of the consequences of this virus are not just the physical consequences, it's the mental health and emotional consequences. Yes, loss of life, but also loss of freedoms. Loss of jobs, loss of income. It is frightening what it is doing. And it is frightening to see how, yes, draconian responses, which we often have to have, but they're going to have significant negative impacts on people. We're already seeing it, high levels of anxiety, high levels of depression. Our youth, children didn't go to school. We just put out common entrance results. How many of those kids who did not have their little tablets because they're poor or they live in rural communities, how many of them did not do well at common entrance? What impact is that going to have on the rest of their lives? You know? Are we thinking? At all levels are we thinking? So we need to get back to what I would call good living. Next slide. This is how the virus behaves in our body. To begin with, there's what we call a viral replicative phase, where it's active in our bodies. At that point in time, we have relatively mild symptoms. People are presenting with body pains, headaches, sore throats, dry coughs, some of them getting loss of smell and taste, or altered taste and smell. That's a rather interesting and unique feature, right? That's relatively mild. Then between about 8 or 9 days, one or two things happen. You either get better, or you move into a hyperinflammatory phase, and this is a deadly phase. When this begins to happen, you begin to get pneumonia in the lungs. You get short of breath. You also begin to get clots throughout your body. About almost 16% of people with COVID get clots. You hear about clots with AstraZeneca. Well, let me tell you, 1 in 100,000 vaccinated people will get a specific kind of clot from the AstraZeneca vaccine, usually after the first dose. Well, I'll tell you, 1 in 5 people with COVID will get a clot. So again, compare your risks and tell me which one you want to take. What also happens, you get shut down, you get a real, all your organs get affected, and we get shock, cardiac failure, what we call respiratory distress syndrome, etc. Now, there are various medications we use along the way, viral suppressors, things like remdesivir, ivermectin, you've heard about all of these, monoclonal antibodies, various other strategies we use. None of them are very effective, by the way. Then in this phase, when you're getting really sick, we cut down your immune system by using steroids or immunotherapy, and we give you oxygen because clearly you're running out of oxygen. You're suffocating, so we need to give you supplemental oxygen. This works very well. Viral suppressors, not so good right now. Next slide. These are the vaccines that we have on the market, the big ones, the AstraZeneca, the Pfizer, the Sinovac, Sputnik, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. The RNAs, that's Pfizer and Moderna. The DNAs in viral vectors, Johnson & Johnson, Sputnik, and AstraZeneca. Sinovac is an inactivated whole virus. The Cuban vaccines, which are not here, we have the Abdala, which is a protein subunit. We have the Soberona, which is a protein subunit. And also the US have one called Novavax, which is a protein subunit. So these are the vaccines that are available. Next slide. Let's go to the next one. What I showed you before was a slide talking about the clotting mechanism complication of AstraZeneca. Let us deal with that right now. What happens when you get that first dose of AstraZeneca? Some people between 4 days and 28 days will have an abnormal immune response to a particular component of their platelets, which are small cellular fragments in our blood, which cause clotting. What then happens is your platelet count drops, you get clots, usually in the brain or the abdomen, and you can get bleeding. As I said, it is a rare complication. It also happens with a certain drug called heparin, which is an anticoagulant. That also happens. So it is not everybody that gets that reaction. It's very easy to diagnose in the lab. We can diagnose that within 15 minutes of you having that, we can diagnose it and we can treat it. So it's, in other words, it's quite manageable. However, like all things, we must be aware. If you are going to have that complication, you must be aware. The other problem I might add to this is that COVID-19 has the same problems. In fact, the same mechanism that AstraZeneca has and Johnson & Johnson have, COVID has it at over 10 times the rate of those vaccines. So if you were worried about getting rid of AstraZeneca, what I tell people, you're worried about getting the clot from AstraZeneca, then worry 10 times over getting that clot with COVID-19. And worry 16,000 times more about getting other clots with COVID. Because AstraZeneca doesn't have the other clots like in your leg and elsewhere, but COVID-19 does, in your lungs, etc. So, the variants of concern, these are the variants that are circulating right now. There's a lot of global monitoring going on for us to determine. As I said, right now we have alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and I should add epsilon. This presentation was done on the 7th of July, so it's dated. Epsilon has to be added to that, and soon lambda. And indeed, kappa might come up thereafter. Yes, people, so I want to just give you those facts and then take your questions. While you're thinking of the questions, you know, I've been a pathologist for a long time, done a lot of postmortems. So I decided to look back again at risk. How many of us would drive to Vieux Fort in an hour's time? Any of you guys in the warehouse do deliveries down to Vieux Fort? All right. Do you think twice about getting in the vehicle and driving to Vieux Fort? No. We don't? No. Do you think you're going to die when you get in that vehicle? I don't. I don't know about you. But imagine that. I was looking at motor vehicle death as compared to vaccine death. And imagine, dying in a motor vehicle accident in St. Lucia, you're 78 times more likely to die driving to Vieux Fort than you are getting the vaccine. 78 times more likely to die driving to Vieux Fort than getting the vaccine. Right? You are 84 times more likely to be stabbed or shot, killed in a homicide. You are 36 times more likely to drown. I go to the beach in the morning and I jump in the sea. I don't even think about drowning. You are 7 times more likely to die from a fall, trip and fall. Tell me how we assess risk in our lives. And like I said, you are 5,000 times more likely to die of COVID than from a vaccine. Across the board. The other thing I might add to you while you all are thinking of your questions, long COVID, we're talking now about death and acute problems. You know what's even more disturbing as well, or equally disturbing? Long COVID, long-term symptoms, and we're seeing it already in St. Lucia. The British, and when I love British science in this pandemic, the Public Health England, NHS have been brilliant. Their politics has not, that is, British politics has not, but their science has been brilliant. You go and you watch, go to Public Health England and look at what they're saying about COVID and tracking the stats. They've been using the AstraZeneca vaccine in millions of people. and they can show you the data. They've been using the Pfizer as well, and they're comparing the two. And do you know the two of them perform equally well? Right? So go and look at some of their data to get a good understanding of what's really happening. And now, what they were also saying, 15% of people right now are showing long COVID symptoms. Children, young adults, and older people. What does long COVID look like? Cardiac disease, renal disease, diabetes, new onset diabetes of all things, respiratory disease. I was saddened. I was doing a clinic up with Windjammer, and a lovely lady, 56-year-old, was talking to me. She had COVID back in February. And she was telling me, and she got clots. She's on anticoagulants, and she had a severe respiratory problem. You know the hill at Windjammer? This lady said prior to the COVID, she used to walk up that hill, no problem. She can't walk up that hill again, right? Without having to stop every portion of the way. That is an example of long COVID, right? So make no mistake, you think you get away because you didn't die. However, there we go. And in addition, another neurological problems, which is what people talk about brain fog, anxiety, and depression. Normally, you could say that is an emotional thing. However, with COVID, what we are finding out is there are microanatomical problems that are also causing that to manifest itself. What they call brain fog as long COVID. And it can be quite severe. Some people it's just, I'm not thinking too right. Other people, a colleague of mine told me, one of her professors in the UK, a gastroenterologist, because she's a gastroenterologist, she told me he got COVID last year and he had to go through rehab. Why? After the COVID, he had actually, it affected him to the point, the long COVID affected him to the point where he had actually forgotten how to drive. That was bizarre, I thought. I said, forgot to drive? She said, yes. For a good 3 months, this man was like completely disabled. And he had to go through the whole process of getting himself rehabilitated. He did. And that's the other good news about long COVID. With multidisciplinary rehab, we can get people back. But not everybody. The anesthetist here was pointing out to me already, putting people to sleep, we're beginning to see people who did not have abnormal heart rhythms are presenting now after their COVID with abnormal heart rhythms. Now, the anesthetists are picking them up because they do these assessments for people who are coming for their elective surgeries. So they're beginning to pick up some of this stuff. So, people, for all these reasons, I took the vaccine, and I'll take it again if I had to. Just like everybody in my family, I insisted that they take it. And I had some vaccine hesitant people because I got some young sons, And young people, especially young males, young males always believe that can happen to them. They could deal with that. I'm young and I'm strong. Bullshit. You don't know. All right. I'm sure you have some questions now.
A couple here. One point first. You mentioned young males. There's a 27-year-old in Jamaica who is impotent because of COVID.
Yes.
And I'm sure the young men here would be interested in understanding that. You said that AstraZeneca is a DNA vaccine?
Yes, it's a DNA viral vector with spike protein DNA in the viral vector.
How similar is that to the vaccines that we've been using before the mRNA vaccine?
It's not brand new technology, but it's technology that has been perfected in the last 20 years or so. And I'm glad you raised that point, because even the mRNA vaccines, although they are now on the market, just like the viral vector vaccines, these vaccines have been in development for the better part of 20 years. And the AstraZeneca vaccine has also been developed for a whole range of diseases, not just COVID-19. It was actually being investigated for other things. And what happened was because the technology, that technology platform, both the mRNA and the viral vector DNA vaccines had reached a point of maturity in terms of their development, it was very easy once we had the sequence of the spike protein from the Chinese, which we got it by about January of 2020. It was very simple to reproduce that genetic material, both in RNA or DNA, and merely put it into the platform, like a plug-and-play vaccine. That is very easy to do. And so that's why those vaccines have come about. People say they develop them so quickly. No, that's not true. And you know, the technology now with genetic sequencing, like I saw this beautiful African-American scientist talking about, as she was saying, over the weekend, we developed the genetic material to put into the vaccines. Because that's how quickly we can genetically sequence and reproduce the genetic sequences now with the technology we have. You know, this is not 50 years ago anymore. So yes, but prior to that, implied in your question is what were the kinds of vaccines we had before? We had protein vaccines, and we had inactivated vaccines, and we had live attenuated vaccines. These were the most common vaccines that we had passed. And the technology now has brought these two other types of vaccines, mRNA and viral vector DNA vaccines, to bear.
One of the big concerns,
Charles, can you come out and use the mic? It's difficult to hear you.
So a lot of young people say to me, I don't know what the long-term effects are of the vaccine. What if there is, and they don't know because it's not long enough. How would you respond to that?
Long-term effects, like the long-term side effects. Yeah. And it's a very valid question. And the truth is, there are a couple of answers. One is we don't really know. Time will tell. That's one. And that's the truth. But also, most of the side effects with vaccines are going to happen relatively quickly. So 90% or more of your side effects are going to happen within the 6 months. So in other words, we've already seen much of what we are going to see, right? Will there be something more in the future? Maybe. You know, but again, it comes back to risk. What are you going, you have to make a decision today. You're uncertain of the future, but you make the best decision today, right? That you can, based on your assessment. So it comes back, what are the long-term side effects of COVID-19? What's going to be in 20 years? People who had COVID-19, what's going to happen to them? So again, I simply say, for me, when I look at the risk, I say the long-term side effects of COVID-19 are worse than the long-term side effects of the vaccine, so I go with the vaccine. Why would I say that? Remember, the vaccine is merely giving us a component of the virus. The virus gives us the same components with other things too, in much greater quantities than the vaccine. You with me? So, in other words, whatever the side effects the vaccine has, COVID has it on steroids. You with me? So, I have to make a decision today. I'll take the vaccine. Yes, it may have long-term side effects, but COVID is going to be worse. Yeah.
I think one of the problems, and it applies to vaccine hesitancy, is that when we talk about mRNA, many individuals believe that it's going to go into your cell and then it's going to somehow affect your DNA.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to this?
No, it's not true. And when we go back, remember that slide I showed you about the immune system? The antigens go into the cell puts out the antigen, the immune system attacks. Do you know, when you take that vaccine, every cell that has any vaccine material in it will be eliminated by the immune system that develops a response to the proteins that the vaccine is causing to be, shall we say, manifested on the cells. So you eliminate the vaccine from your body. It may take 2 weeks, but you will eliminate it. So it will not get into your DNA. It gets into your cell, that is true, but it does not get into your genetic material. It does not alter your genetic material. It stays outside of your nucleus. It does not get in. So it's not a problem. Now, again, back to COVID versus the vaccine. Remember, everything the vaccine does, including putting its genetic material into your cell, the virus does on steroids. So if you're worried about the vaccine, let us say you're worried about the vaccine altering your cell, but you're not worried about COVID altering your cell? That's, again, does not make sense. But take it from me that you eliminate, as you could fully appreciate, yes, here you go. You can fully appreciate that every cell that is manifesting the thing will be taken by the immune system and destroyed. So all the cells that get vaccinated get destroyed.
One last one for you. CDC VAERS system. A lot of that has been quoted now to say these are the side effects or the deficiencies with the vaccine. How do you address that? How significant are these issues that we see in the VAERS system?
Yeah, of course, all side effects are significant. The acute, the medium term and the long term, they're all significant. And I would encourage people to, yes, follow the CDC sites and see. Nothing is hidden, you know. We talk about conspiracy theories, but nothing is really hidden. The information is there. The scientists are putting out the information in very often raw and unadulterated forms for us to interpret. All we need to do is look at these side effects and understand the risks, the relative risks of the vaccine side effects versus the disease. So any time you look at a vaccine side effect, you also need to understand what is the viral effects in your body and the viral long-term effects. So yes, I would support. Go into CDC VRS systems, look and see what they're saying, look at their side effects, and in fact, we should be reporting. By the way, all of us who get vaccinated must report any side effects. And I think we've all had, all of us who've been vaccinated, and there are a number of us here. And in fact, I want to congratulate those at J.E.Bergasse who have been vaccinated. You've done the right thing. You're wise, right? And that is good. Because and I would ask you who have been vaccinated, as I am one too, I feel so much safer walking around. Because I know that I am safe for myself. I may not be safe for other people, but I know I'm safe for myself, right? And that gives me a great sense of comfort. And I wish we were all safe. And that's why all of us must get vaccinated. Yeah?
Can you talk about the issue of, I hear that I'm one of those who encourage vaccinations. I still have to getting on. Can you talk about...
Just take off your mask for a bit so they could...
Can you talk about the issues of... Can you talk about the issue of candidacy? You know, who makes... Some people believe that they would not be very good candidates. You know, because of various reasons.
Yes.
Where I am diabetic. Or
yes.
I am a breastfeeding mother.
Yes.
Or, you know, can you speak about that issue?
Good question. Because, there's one simple answer. If you're worried because you have an underlying condition that you think puts you at risk of a vaccine complication, think about the COVID complication, because it is thousands of fold times greater. So I tell people who have underlying conditions, I'll come to the pregnancies just now. You have diabetes, get vaccinated for sure. You have DVT, clots, get vaccinated for sure. Right? You have SLE, get vaccinated for sure. You have asthma, you have COPD, you're overweight, you have hypertension, you have cardiac disease, get vaccinated. These are all underlying conditions for severe disease and death in COVID. So these are the people that are most protected. In fact, when we looked at the strategy for vaccination, and the UK, interestingly, have done it quite well. Older people over the age of 50 in particular, are a priority group to be vaccinated. Why? Older people are at more risk of severe disease. So that's people like me, Anthony. Right? Older people are at greater risk regardless of any underlying conditions. But if you have an underlying condition, regardless of your age, you are at a greater risk. And that becomes, you are called a vulnerable population and you must be vaccinated as priority. So all the people you mentioned should be vaccinated as priority. Now, pregnant women, very interesting. In the set of studies that were done, as most trials for vaccines, we do not put children into the trials and we don't put pregnant women into the trials. We don't put them in because pregnant women are carrying an unborn fetus and we don't want to put them through a trial when we do not know the consequences of what we are trying. So we tend to keep those populations out and we use adults. So when the trial said that, and people say, well, it's not safe in pregnancy. Not true. It's not that it's not safe. We did not use pregnant women in the trials. Now, there were some women who became pregnant during the trials. And since then, the guidelines are becoming very clear. If you are pregnant, you should get vaccinated. Why? Because pregnancy itself and pregnant women themselves seem to have a more severe course when they get COVID. So it's back to the same argument. If you're pregnant, should you get COVID or should you get the vaccine? No brainer. Get the vaccine. Don't get COVID. Now, if you're a pregnant woman who is sure that you will not get COVID, then maybe you have an option. How can you be sure? Look at St. Lucia. You can go anywhere in St. Lucia and feel that you're safe. You can't. I have a young man the other day. I've seen over 500 people that have COVID since January, okay? Especially in that big wave that we had. A young man who works from home tell me he came in and he had COVID. He told me, well. He said, Doc, I was so careful. I follow all protocols. I stay at home. I ain't go nowhere. It was my birthday last weekend. And a partner of mine told me, let's go and have a lunch. And I went and had a lunch at a particular restaurant. And a number of people came up and were talking to us. And he says, you know, I know it's there I get the thing. So in other words, you don't know where you're going to be safe. You come to work, you don't know if you're going to be safe. We can follow all protocols, masking, distancing, everything. So nothing is 100%. Nothing. Right? So what choice are you going to make as a pregnant woman? Now you talk about breastfeeding. You didn't, but because that's the extension of pregnancy. People say, but if you should a woman who has COVID or vaccinated, should she breastfeed? Yes, of course she should. And the studies are very clear. In fact, WHO, CDC, NIH, all of them are saying even a pregnant woman who has COVID should still nurse her baby. Because actually the baby is protected by mother's antibodies and the mother's breast milk will not infect baby. So, for pregnant women, my advice, get vaccinated. In fact, I don't know, when you ask me, somebody will say, well, who should not get vaccinated? The only people who should not get vaccinated are people that have had the clotting complication. And that's people who have had clotting complications to heparin in the past. People who have PD4 antibodies, they should not get the AstraZeneca. They should get the Pfizer. Okay? Unfortunately, in St. Lucia, right now, we only have AstraZeneca available. I hope that we get Pfizer shortly, and I hope we get the Abdala from Cuba shortly, which is the one that is in the forefront. They have the Soberana too, and the Abdala. So hopefully they will get those shortly.
Okay, so I have 9 questions.
Woo!
Alright, so in the beginning, we had a 6 to 8 week time span before we got the second dose, but that was extended to 10 to 12 weeks.
That's right.
Is it okay to still get it between the 6 to 8 weeks?
It is. It's okay. The issue there is effectiveness. What we have found with the AstraZeneca one, that when you wait 12 weeks, it's more effective than if you had it at 6 weeks. 8 weeks is a nice balance, or nice moderate approach, if you prefer. So it's really it's not about safety, it's about efficacy. Right? It's about, so you might move from being, let's say, 88% to 95% effective after your second dose if you delay to the 12 weeks.
Thank you. Second question, if you already had COVID and you develop natural immunity, do you recommend getting vaccinated?
Yes, we do. And there are two reasons for that. One is because you get a more sustainable and robust response when even if you've had COVID. For you to get long-term immunity, the vaccine will help with that. Secondly, and probably more importantly, the long COVID symptoms, up to 2/3 of people who had COVID and have long COVID, when they get vaccinated, the long COVID symptoms get eliminated. The reason for that is some people are believing that long COVID is a chronic, low-level stimulation of your inflammatory system because of residual viral entities such as viral RNA and stuff, so that is still stimulating your immune system and causing those long-term effects. That's one theory. And that theory is that if you boost their immune system, they will eliminate cells that are harboring bits of virus.
Next question. The information that you presented today was very well researched, and some persons think that it's very well put together. Why is it that you cannot find that information online, but it's so easy to get the contradictory?
I think that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said it well when he said the children of darkness are often more zealous than the children of the light. People who have an agenda, right, especially and are fanatical about that agenda for whatever reason, will go to any extreme to promote their agenda. And unfortunately, in this democratized social media environment, it's easy for one person to cause a massive wave of misinformation. So that I think is why you're finding this. Now, what you'll find is science now is far more circumspect in how it presents its information, because science is more open-minded. So it's like, well, yes, this is good, but these are the problems with it. Now, it's like, you ever look at those ads on television for medications? They tell you this, but then they run through a whole list of the negative things. You can get bleeding, headaches, vomiting, nausea, and occasional death with this drug. Please take this drug. You know, these kinds of messages are what that negative message resonates with people. So we have to be so careful with it. And that is why I think that misinformation has got more traction than right information. But it also speaks to our lack of education, by the way, as people. Because we should be training ourselves and our young people to be discerning and filtering information, seeing misinformation for what it is, understanding it, and being able to research good information. Now, you know, the misinformers tell us don't listen to the science, because then people have an agenda. They in bed with Big Pharma. They in bed with the corrupt politicians. You know, all that sort of stuff. They in bed with Bill Gates. All kinds of, or Jeff Bezos, whoever else again they want to speak about. Something is going to be there. And people are going to say, oh yeah, that is true. And unfortunately, you know, there is a lot of truth in terms of the corruption in life and how it has interfered with good systems. But I would ask you to move away from that and just, you see all this information that I put here? None of that came from me. All of that came from the reputable sites on the internet. Scientific papers, etc., etc. You can do the same thing. So this information is available. But unfortunately, good information, it looks like you have to seek it out. It's not pumped at you. Now, should it be done? Yes. My quarrel with the governments here and elsewhere is I don't think they've done a good job at communicating effectively. Right? I think in St. Lucia, for instance, mixed messages have been sent. You know, it's all right, don't worry, but then worry. Well, that mixed message is dangerous, right? For me, the message should have been clear from day one. An invader in our territory, seek and destroy. By any means necessary, get rid of the virus. That should have been the message. Not, boy, we can learn to live with it. I don't like that message. I don't want to live with this thing. I want to destroy it. If perchance, yes, I have no choice, well, then okay. But that's not my primary thing. My primary thing is destroy the invader. Right? And that is what I would have liked to have seen. Yeah? So be a child, back to Reverend Martin Luther King. Be a child of the light, not a child of the darkness. You know, life and death, when you think about it, you choose life rather than death, and you promote life over death. I honestly, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Okay, you sort of touched a little bit on that, but she did not understand clearly. What do you recommend that she get her platelet count checked first before getting the vaccine?
No. Unfortunately, what should happen? Now, let's talk a little bit about that particular vaccine complication with AstraZeneca. Okay? That particular complication is going to arise after the first dose. It's going to happen within usually between 4 and 28 days. What's going to happen? You will get a severe headache or severe abdominal pain, or you'll begin to see bleeding spots on your body. Okay? As soon as you see that, you go to your healthcare provider and let them do the test. That is when you'll see the platelets low. That is when you'll see the D-dimer, the clotting factors high, the inflammatory factors high. That is when we will be able to diagnose you. We have the antibodies, by the way, that we can test. And we will pick up those antibodies and be able to treat you with the anticoagulant medication and prevent any further deterioration or complications thereof. The sooner you present, if you have that complication, the better. How many people could we expect in St. Lucia? With 180,000 people, if we vaccinated every single person in St. Lucia, which we wouldn't because children are exempt from it, if we did that, we would have a maximum, based on stats, of 2 people that would get that complication. Okay? That gives you the kind of risks we are talking about. Can she test for antibodies before? She can. The only problem with that is that if these antibodies are not circulating normally, and they only happen after you've had that complication. So, in other words, they cannot predict that you're going to have the complication. They're going to occur after you've got the complication. So, unfortunately, that's what we have to deal with.
I have another question, Dr. King. At the current level of herd immunity that we have here in St. Lucia, what sort of protocols should we be adopting generally and within an office? Because generally it's thought, okay, since we are vaccinated, we don't need to wear masks as often. We have to be, we can free up a little. What is your opinion on that?
No, you can't free up. From the very beginning of this pandemic, some of us in the medical community felt the following. We should lock ourselves down, which meant also keeping our borders closed until such time as we had vaccine to get us to herd immunity and then open. That is what, to be honest, that is what we wanted. That was not a politically or economically feasible solution. So we went the other way, which is mask, socially distance, quarantine, isolate, stay far, right? And that is what we have to continue doing until such time as we get to 80% of our population immunized. So what I would say for J.E.Bergasse, get up to 80%, 90%, 100% vaccinated, and then you guys could do it among yourselves, right? But the public, not until they get to 80% can they do it out in the public. So we have to continue the protocol until we get to the level of 80% immunity. Okay?
And what percentage are we at right now?
16. We're in bad shape. And we are very vulnerable. We've had a lot of we've had ongoing exposure. currently with the bacchanal that's going on, we're having more exposures. I would be surprised if we don't get a Delta wave of corona in the next few weeks. I'd be very surprised. I see Jamaica. Jamaica is now saying, Her Holiness saying he's going back into lockdown because of the waves that he's expecting, right? So the same thing's going to happen to us. I remember what I told you. Wet your bed.
Okay, so when I get the flu, I also have asthma. I get a very severe attack.
Yeah.
And if I do get the vaccine and I have side effects, what is the likelihood of me getting an asthma attack? And what will happen? Do they have systems in place to support that if I get an attack at the station?
Yeah. So, two things on that. Asthma attacks are not, we have not seen increased asthma with the vaccine. However, the first 24 hours when you get that vaccine, your immune system is cranked up. And so you get body pains, headaches, chills, sometimes fevers, joint pains, headache, so on, nausea sometimes. Can that trigger somebody to have an asthma attack? Possibly. But that's not what we're really seeing. But if you are going to have an asthma attack related to the vaccine, it's going to happen at that time. Thereafter, you'll be okay. Because you don't get pulmonary complications with the vaccine. All you get is a heightened immune response. Now with COVID, you will get a direct lung inflammation. That is going to trigger asthma. And in fact, asthmatics do worse with COVID than the non-asthmatics. Okay? That data in the world literature is still in a certain amount of dispute, but it is recognized as a highly likely underlying factor to more severe disease. COPD, on the other hand, which is like a cousin of asthma, because when I say a cousin, because it looks a lot like asthma related to smoking. Many of our young men, and now more so our young women, are involved in smoking, and they do have COPD. That is a definite underlying risk factor. It's COVID-19, but not with the vaccine. Everybody with COPD should be vaccinated, because chance of having a bad reaction with COPD is high. Having said all that, COVID-19 and asthma and COPD, bad. Vaccine, asthma, COPD, not a big problem. So, yes, if you have asthma, please get vaccinated.
Okay, thank you. This is a very worded question.
Sure.
I think I speak for a lot of solutions when I ask that question. Some vaccines are not FDA approved.
Yes.
And a lot of people feel like they've been pressured into something that is still in clinical testing.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Okay. AstraZeneca is WHO, European, UK regulatory authorities approved. Okay? That's the one we have. WHO is really the body that we look at. FDA is the American Drug Authority, not the World Drug Authority. Okay? FDA makes its decisions based on its own medical situation, its own, and that involves the holistic view of medicine. The United States, very well supplied with Pfizer and Moderna, and indeed Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson, by the way, is really the same, it's like the sister of AstraZeneca. It's really the same technology, very same vaccine. Okay? It's just produced by Johnson & Johnson rather than AstraZeneca. All right. That is approved. That has FDA approval. So the Americans have approved the vaccines in their neighborhood, in their country. And that is their right, and so be it. AstraZeneca was a vaccine which is a non-profit vaccine. It was produced by University of Oxford and the AstraZeneca company in partnership as a not-for-profit vaccine, which makes it, for want of a better word, and maybe it's a bad word, the poor man's vaccine. Because it's cheap. It's the cheapest vaccine on the market. Because of that, there's no profit in it. And it's interesting that in this world, a not-profit, altruistic approach is the one getting the licks. Now you can ask yourself why. I spoke earlier about the lobbies and the geopolitical and the corruption that happens. I wonder, that is where I wonder whether it does not play out. But anyway, so AstraZeneca is a very good vaccine. It's WHO approved. It's a safe vaccine. It's a not-for-profit vaccine. It's a vaccine that between you and me, I embrace. Now, I fully understand the UK guidelines, which says they prefer to use AstraZeneca in the 40s and over because the clotting complication that AstraZeneca has is, when you look at the risk-benefit of clotting versus COVID, over 40s and over, no-brainer. AstraZeneca, very safe, very good, risk-benefit, beautiful. They say, however, under 40, they prefer to use Pfizer. And I want to talk a bit more about Pfizer. They prefer to use Pfizer because it does not have that clotting complication. And the risk-benefit ratio of Pfizer in the under 40s is better than AstraZeneca. However, they also add the fact that if you go to Public Health England, you'll see it. If you have no choice, because you don't have Pfizer, use the AstraZeneca, regardless of your age, because it is safer than COVID, much. So, and the bottom line is, what vaccine is the best vaccine? The one that's available to you. Of all these WHO-approved vaccines. The one that you have in your neighborhood is the best one. So don't get caught up with FDA, WHO, la, European, Swedish, France. Don't get caught up in all of that, right? Because those decisions are being made in populations that have different dynamics, in a different context, different options than St. Lucia. Okay? So understand that. And a lot of the conspiracy theorists will use some of those arguments to drive the uncertainty and the hesitancy. Because it's easy to confuse us, very easy to confuse us.
Dr. King, I think you just brought about the point which I'm about to ask concerning the, well, it's about which vaccine should I choose. I've heard that the Cuban vaccine is a more trustworthy vaccine. Maybe it's a case where we should know the components in vaccines, which one is better. And I've always said if I have to take up the vaccine, I will be able to take the Cuban. Number two, I'd like to know how soon it will be in St. Lucia. And even if you said that the vaccine that's available is the better vaccine for us. I mean, you're saying that in terms of, I don't know, affordability, because I know we eat, I've heard that the fruits, you should eat fruits that is seasonal fruits of the fruits that's available in your country, that's the better fruits for you.
True.
But in a case like that, I don't think that is in that sense. But I think I'll put human rights there that yes, okay, I will agree to take the vaccine if I have to.
Of course.
How can the Cuban vaccine be available?
Okay. You raised a number of very important points. First of all, you said that the Cuban vaccine is more trustworthy. Now, it's interesting because is that impression based on the science or the geopolitics of Cuba versus Europe? It's all right. You don't.
More about the vaccine.
Exactly.
Components of all of them.
Now, yeah, but the components are fully available. You can go online and you can search the components. I think, did I print it out? One of the presentations I have the components of the vaccines. And essentially, the AstraZeneca vaccine, no animal products, blah, 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 no real allergens. There's a thing, there's a kind of surfactant-like material in it that some people can have an allergy to. But then again, all the vaccines have one of these mechanisms, or one of these components, including the Cuban one, the Abdala. The reason that I believe we more trust the Cuban vaccine, there are two reasons I think we can say. One is historical. And I was having a nice conversation with the new British rep on this. You see, we are a region that suffered under European oppression for a long time. And that is deeply entrenched in us. So we don't face it, we don't talk about it often, but it's deep in us. All right? And it's manifesting itself here. We more trust the Cubans. Why? The Cubans have been with us. They send help to us. They're there with us. We know that their health system is a good health system, etc., etc. So we trust them because they are us. They are like us. They are with us. They are a sister. The Europeans are not. And that, I think, is fueling our emotional trust. Because it's not scientific trust, it's emotional trust. And at the end of the day, one would have to argue that trust is a feeling. Trust is a feeling. So trust clearly has emotion as an important component. However, I would fully agree with you that we should have the Cuban one available. The problem is it's not yet WHO approved because it's just finished its phase 3 trials. So the safety of that vaccine is now being analyzed. The efficacy of that vaccine is now being analyzed. We saw posts, but they're not scientific posts yet, saying that it's 92% effective, which puts it into the same realm as AstraZeneca, Moderna, and Pfizer, which are all in the 90s in terms of the efficacy. So it looks like, anecdotally, it's there, right? But that has to be scrutinized. I really hope the WHO gives them approval quickly and that we can bring it in. I do know that our government already has arrangements with Cuba that as soon as we get WHO approval, the vaccines will come in, right? Pfizer, I was going to mention a little bit about Pfizer when I was talking about the under 40s. The Pfizer vaccine also has complications of heart inflammation, myocarditis, in young people, especially young males. It's a rare complication again. Again, it's like a 1 in 100,000 people. Usually it's mild. So everything that we use will have a problem. But you have to weigh this problem versus that problem and then make a decision that puts you into a safer place. So I'm going to keep on reiterating that. So back to where we are. Look at it. We're about, we're going to have a wave of corona shortly. Can you wait for the Cuban vaccine? That's a question you have to ask yourself. Yes. If you say so and you get COVID while you are waiting, what are you going to say? Are you going to say, I wish, too late? Because remember I tell you, too late shall be the cry. We've had many people sick or even dying, and not only here, but globally, and some of their last words and last thoughts, I wish I had protected myself. I wish I had been vaccinated. So, don't be emotional in your decision making. Put your emotion aside, look at hard facts, and then you can let emotion play thereafter. When you've had a clear, cold, hard look at the facts of the matter. Okay?
If you have an ongoing condition where you have inflammation in your body, would you recommend getting the vaccine?
Yes.
Why?
Because the vaccine will protect you from the COVID, and if you have inflammation in your body, your COVID is going to have more severe course in you. Because as I pointed out in the slide, COVID is, in its severe phase, is an inflammatory problem. So I mean, we're talking about hypothetical inflammation. I'm not sure exactly what is causing that inflammation that makes a person ask that question. But let us assume there is a kind of inflammation that if you have COVID, you get more inflammation. So that person's at greater risk. So you're clearly much safer taking the vaccine and preventing yourself from getting COVID because the inflammation that the vaccine causes is minimal compared to the inflammation that COVID is going to cause. COVID causes long inflammation. The vaccine at the most causes very short-term inflammation. Not even inflammation, it's an immune response. It's not even really inflammation it's causing in the body. It's merely an immune reaction that it's causing. So if you have inflammation, you're safer with the vaccine than with COVID.
Okay. Another question up to mind.
Mm-hmm.
when we were younger, I think every single one of us here and the majority of institutions, you might have touched on that already, we did get vaccinated for measles, whatever. And we only had to get that shot once in our lifetime, and that was it. Since this is a new virus, what is the lifespan of this vaccine?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, the scientists at the beginning were saying we don't know, we're not sure. With the variants popping up, it might be annual. But there's more data coming out now, which is looking at the vaccines. These vaccines are giving long-term immunity. And I'm not surprised by that. By the way, it's not true. We get repeated of the same vaccine when we are children, and we get repeats. Be it the hepatitis B, be it the DPT, there are repeats. The children have to get the vaccines more than once for the same reason, to build immunity, right? So it looks like, and I'm not surprised. Looking at the science of this, you see it's quite strategic that what these vaccines are is they are targeting the S protein. Now the S protein has to remain relatively constant for this virus to continue being infectious. Why? I showed you this virus infects us by using the spike protein interlocking with a particular receptor on our cells. It's like a lock and key, like the door. So if the key becomes too different from the lock, it will not fit. So in other words, the spike protein, although it does change, it does mutate, but it cannot mutate too much. So that is why I believe that you are seeing that these vaccines are continuing to have immunity to the variants. And that is going to continue, I think, for a long period of time. The other thing is that this particular virus is not like an influenza virus. Although people call it like a flu, but the influenza virus is very different. The influenza is a family of viruses, H and N's as we call them, H1N1, H2N3, etc., etc. There are hundreds of different flu viruses, and they change every year. This is a single virus that is mutating somewhat within itself, but it is not, the SARS-CoV-2 is not a family of hundreds of viruses. It's really one virus. And so I believe that saying all of that is to say that I suspect we will have long-term immunity from this vaccine. So I more believe it'll be like the hepatitis B vaccines that I think some of you may have had, and our children are getting now, where you may have to repeat that every 10 years or so. That's what I'm really looking forward to with this. But of course, that's theory. Experience and time will tell whether that theory is true.
Okay. 2 more questions again. We've seen cases where persons who got vaccinated, they got COVID afterwards. If you do develop symptoms, how do you know if it's the flu or COVID?
Test.
You have to get a test.
Yeah, it's one of 2 tests you must do. In fact, 3 tests. The same 3 tests I mentioned, we can use them. I'll tell you how we use them. The antigen test will pick up when you have active virus in you. The PCR test will pick up if you've just had virus and it's active or not. And the antibody test. And the antibody test can differentiate between viral antibodies and vaccine antibodies. So like for the test that we're using is not to the spike protein. It doesn't pick up antibodies to spike. So if you got vaccinated and you come for an antibody test right now, it will be negative. It doesn't mean that you don't have antibodies from the vaccine. It means you don't have any anti-spike, because the antibody test we're using is what we call anti-nucleocapsid antibody testing, which picks up your antibody to viral protein of nucleocapsid, not spike. You with me? So we can actually use that also to differentiate people who have been exposed or not exposed to COVID, SARS-CoV-2. But the bottom line, the viral testing, which is PCR or antigen, is how you would distinguish whether somebody is actively infected with SARS-CoV-2 or not. Yes, and I think I explained why is it that vaccinated people can still get infected. I explained. But the truth is, they will not get as sick as if they were not vaccinated. We have a nice old friend of ours, over 80 in this country, with multiple comorbidities. And he told me he thinks he should go on television as the poster boy for the vaccine. Because he said if he got COVID, he'd be dead, for sure. He got vaccinated, but he got COVID after he was vaccinated. And what he had was what was essentially, as he called it, a cold. And he said, whoa, look how I dodged the bullet, right? And that, I think, it's important for us to understand. I've seen a number of people that have been vaccinated and did get active infection, but all of them did very well. And if you look, in fact, don't even take my word. Look at the United States and what they're telling you, who's presenting in the hospitals right now with COVID. Mostly, it's unvaccinated people. And that doesn't mean the vaccinated people are not getting the virus. Many of the vaccinated people are. The other nice thing about the vaccine is it reduces the transmission. The Public Health England has a nice set of tables, and up to 50% of people have no transmission after they've been vaccinated. So in other words, after you've been vaccinated, even if you got exposed and you were, shall we say, you should have been infected, you don't pass on at all that virus. And if you do get infected, the viral load is low, and your chance of transmission is also low, because transmission is related to the amount of virus you have in you, what we call the viral load. Okay? So that's another benefit of vaccination. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, that was all.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Welcome. Answered all your questions? All right, very good. Yeah, you know, people just think they're a serious thing. It's not a hoax, it's real. And we have to make the right decisions. So you mentioned, where's my lady? You mentioned human rights. And I fully agree with you. Human rights is so important. I'm a human rights advocate. That's why I don't believe in mandatory vaccinations. I believe they should be voluntary. But I think that in itself, it speaks to the philosophy that I have, that if people are given the right information and they are wise enough, they will make the wise choice and they will voluntarily agree. I think mandatory is wrong. Also, I am not a fan of lockdown and curfews, because I think those are violations of human rights in and of themselves. So I don't like them either. I understand them, just like I understand mandatory vaccination. But there's a beautiful paper that I read, and I was on a podcast, conversation with a guy from the UK, a professor from Oxford, an ethicist, talking about the ethics of mandatory vaccination. And I have to agree with him. Beautiful paper that he wrote for the BMJ, talking about what we should do with COVID. Given the way COVID is not the worst disease we could get. There are many worse diseases. We've seen some in the past, and we see some more in the future. COVID has put us on a dilemma of public rights, individual rights, because of the way it is. Because, as we're saying, 0.6% or so of people who become infected will die. And maybe about 5% will become critically ill. And maybe about 10% will be hospitalized. But does that mean that we should infringe all human rights because of that? Because that's a relative, if you want to look at it, relatively few. 90% of people are fine. So what are you doing? You know, so it's put us in the horns of this dilemma. So what he was saying is, he believes the right thing to do is incentivize vaccination. And you incentivize it in a number of ways. One, you inform people so that they have internal motivation to do the right thing for themselves and the people around them. That's one. Secondly, using science, you create freedoms for vaccinated people. Why? Because it makes sense. I just mentioned, if J.E.Bergasse is 100% vaccinated, you don't have to use masks in your workplace. So you can drop your mask and you can hug your girlfriends and your boyfriends and your partners. You know, I'm not talking about the intimate girlfriends and boyfriends. All right, you know, you can have lunch together, you can talk, you can laugh, and so on. You can even have little social gatherings as your vaccinated people. You can have your parties. Why not? That's the freedoms we speak of. The other thing is, why not incentivize groceries? We have people suffering in this with loss of jobs, don't have food in there. Why not $200 vouchers of groceries if you get yourself vaccinated? Why not? Why not? So things like that, I think, are quite reasonable. And it's good because, you see, you have to think of people's minds. If I decide to take the vaccine, my mental health is much better than if a government comes and holds me down, or a government says, you cannot enter this building no matter whether you masked or not, unless. You start denying me things in a more fundamental way. So I think it's giving us a real human rights debate and argument that I think as a people we must engage. And we haven't. We haven't had this conversation properly yet. And I think we should have it. You should have it in your workplace. Should you, for instance, only employ people that are vaccinated? Should you tell people you have 3 months to be vaccinated, otherwise I'll dismiss you? Is that right? So, but these are the things that we need to truly engage. Should I, as a workplace, then incentivize? Should I tell you, everybody gets $500 this month if they get vaccinated? You know, these are the things we should be thinking about.
Stephen, what I thought though, that populations are different and nations are different. I'm thinking aloud here. Populations are different. World populations as well as, nations. I mean, there will be populations with highly illiterate people and populations with not so illiterate people. So surely that decision, as to whether or not public health or individual rights trumps public health has to be based on what you're dealing with.
Exactly.
The situation you're dealing with.
Exactly.
The nation you're dealing with.
And the virus you're dealing with.
And the virus you're dealing
Everything.
with as well.
Yeah.
And even the office that you're dealing with.
Yes. Yes.
So it's an interesting
It's a very interesting dilemma. I'll send Anthony that particular paper because the guy talks about the risks of COVID and the physical, mental, and then the risks of some of the strategies that we are using to minimize COVID spread and maximize safety. So it speaks to the ethics of all that. COVID has really challenged us at all levels, But guys, we're going to make our decisions,
What is it? Well, similar, maybe, but not quite, but similar to smoking. As a non-smoker, I wanted to say, I don't want to be in a room where there's people smoking. I'm not saying you don't have the right to smoke, but I also have a right not to suffer from the side effects of your smoking.
I agree.
So this is similar. Why should I put myself at risk because you don't want to get vaccinated? It's fine, you don't have to, but don't be around maybe me who's trying to protect myself and the people that I love. I
quite agree. But you know what? My counter to that, just to add to that, I agree with you. Except if I'm vaccinated, I'm safe. So in other words, I'm not worried about them unvaccinated people. That's their problem. Ultimately, it's their problem because they're the ones that are going to suffer, not me. So in fact, I'm a greater risk to them because I might very well get the virus and not know and give it to them and they may die. So they're the ones at risk, not me. So you see where I'm coming from?
I do, but if I now can carry that virus because I got it from someone not vaccinated, don't I now have the risk to take it to someone that I care about?
You do.
Does not have the chance to get vaccinated yet, like a child?
Yes, you do.
Because they can't get vaccinated?
Yes, you do.
So now I'm putting my children at risk because I'm around someone who wouldn't get vaccinated.
That is correct. That is correct. But you'd also appreciate that that's a smaller risk because once you're vaccinated, you're even protected from becoming infected or passing it on. So in other words, that's why I say this COVID-19 is really challenging us to truly think and truly dissect out the issues when we make our pronouncements as to what is proper or not in our strategies. But anyway.
Just wanted to thank you for taking your time this morning, coming in. I hope we're going to make this available as a recording, so our staff can go back to review it and also the general public. The information was very well put together. I think the questions were very valid as well, and it gives us time to think more on that. So thank you very much.
You're most welcome.